You're a pioneer who has recently traveled out west to strike it rich and to make a name for yourself. You'll prospect for gold, recruit workers, rustle some horses, establish businesses, and more in Coloma. Coloma is a simultaneous action selection worker placement game set in the Old West from Final Frontier Games and designed by Jonny Pac. The game takes about 1 to 1.5 hours to play. It's for 1 to 5 players. It'll be on Kickstarter February 20th. Let's look at the prototype components. There's a game board, player boards, cards, tiles, tokens, meeples, and more. Here's a quick overview of Coloma. It's played over 3 rounds. Each round has 5 chapters, and in a chapter, players will be simultaneously choosing an action to take. But you don't want too many players to choose the same action or they'll bust, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So let's jump into Coloma and check it out. At the beginning of the chapter, you'll reset the Barker and Bust tiles in the middle of the game board, then resolve the event where the Barker is, like all players getting meeples, gold, or things like that. Then all players simultaneously select a site to go to with their dials and place their pioneers on the matching spots. Then you resolve each site starting with site 1. You'll either boom or bust at a site. Players bust at the site with the most pioneers at a site, and you move the X to that site. Players at that spot will only take the top action. The other players have a boom at their site and can take both actions in either order. At site 1, you can activate cards that you've already built in your tableau. You'll be able to build rivers and bridges at site 2 that can give you some major points. You can build town and hotel buildings at site 3. The buildings are cards in the game. At site 4, you can move your wagon on the frontier map. You're going to place your meeples in the shootout area in Site 5 and or place tents out on the board, either on the events that can help you double the amount of stuff you get or on the frontier lands that will help with scoring points at the end of the game. The Barker will let you purchase camps and horses and even get you a barrel from the Outlaw's hideout. Then you'll remove the pioneers from the board and start the next chapter. At the end of 5 chapters, the round ends and the shootout begins. You'll compare the total number of gunmen to the outlaws. If more gunmen, then you award based on this chart. If tied or more outlaws, then you look at this chart. Notice that players with no gunmen in the shootout are going to lose meeples either way. Then you'll refresh the board and start the next round that has 5 chapters, and after that you'll go into round 3 that has 5 chapters. So in essence, players will have 15 turns during the game. Of course, some turns are going to be better than others depending if you boom or bust, and at the end of the game, you'll move into final scoring. You'll score points according to the chart based on the number of camps in the frontier. You'll score the number of dudes in your lodge times the number of hotels, so 5 dudes times 3 hotels is 15 points. You'll get points from bridges you might have. They all score differently, usually based on a specific item that you have. Then you'll subtract points for people in your graveyard. Then whoever has the most points at the end of the game is going to win. The game takes a little bit longer with more players, but not too much longer because of that simultaneous action selection mechanic. It just takes a little bit more time to resolve the actions. I think that's one of the interesting things in the game. What actions are you going to choose? And what are the other players going to choose that turn? You don't want to go where everyone else is going or you'll bust and then you won't have as good of an action that turn. So you gotta sort of keep track of what other players are doing. There is a lot that you can do in the game, and it might seem overwhelming at first when you look at the board and see all the icons and places on the board, but your choices are limited. You have to choose one of the 5 spots to go to on the middle tile. But even with those limited choices, there are still a lot of ways to get points. Should I focus on the frontier, on the rivers, on the bridges, or even those cards in my hand? There are quite a few cards in the game, They'll help you gain different things once they are built in your tableau. The cost is in the upper left-hand corner, and you choose which cost based on what is available at the site you choose. Victory points are on the upper right. You can gain things like horses, more cards, gold, and more. The gold value will change throughout the game, which affects how many coins you can get for a piece of gold. Of course, the theme comes through in the art wonderfully, but I think the theme comes through in the gameplay as well. It makes sense to build bridges over water, settling in the frontier, how the shootout works, or even using gold for currency. I like at the beginning of each chapter you get something, but if you build a tent, you can double that effect. If you strategize properly, you can do better in the game knowing what items you'll be getting from chapter to chapter to help you get points. There are ways to get points during the game and at the end of the game, so you need to decide what path you're going to lean more heavily towards during the game or end of the game, or try to keep it more balanced and see if you can pull it out. I'm a big fan of the Miko's art, and he always does a great job. And we're working with prototype components, but the pictures I saw for the new components like the Pioneers are pretty sweet. We were able to interview Jonny Pac, the designer of Coloma, on our podcast, and we did a live playthrough of the game on our YouTube channel. We'd love for you to check both of those out. I will put a link in the description below. So if you enjoy worker placement games, simultaneous action selection games, if you like this Old West theme, then check out Coloma from Final Frontier Games on Kickstarter, and we'd love for you to subscribe to Tantrum House. You won't have as good of an action turn during your action.